Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Story of a Storyteller, the podcast where I get to know the story of storytellers. I have yet to get a good introduction out there. And my guest today is Jenn Ashton. How are you, Jen?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I am too. I can't wait to get to know you a lot better. Um, Jen, you're an author, but you're also a visual artist, and I think that's one of the big things I really wanted to explore with you and everything. But as everyone listening to this podcast knows, I always like to start at the very beginning. So we'll start there. And I kind of, you have a really, how can I say this? Um, Varied past. It's like you seem to have kind of been really invested in lots of different kind of walks of life. I mean, you wrote as a young kid and you were published very young, like 14 or something like
Yeah.
that.
hmm
And you worked in teaching and education, which is near and dear to my heart. And it just seems like writing and storytelling and literacy and all that seems to be a common thread. So was this always the case, even like with you as a kid, or is just something that you kind of developed an interest in?
No, I think from my earliest knowing of myself, I knew I was a writer. I kind of just had that knowledge. I don't know where it came from. I started reading very early, everything in the house. There was not a lot of books in the house, but I read everything we had, um, from anatomy journals and Time Life to the encyclopedia, everything. I would just read everything.
Sounds familiar.
Um, I think, my ancestors didn't have a written language. That was all oral, and it was all oral tradition. So that was their form of sharing and connection and passing down stories and passing down culture. And I feel like that was in my DNA already. And maybe that's why I've always had that. And I think I feel like OTU education is the highest calling. I just think it's the top of the top. And if anybody can read and write, I think that's your world is open to you at that point. So
Very much so. I think you just reminded me of a child psychology lecturer that I had when I was in college, and he maintained out of all the subjects, and he said, and I always get into fights with maths teachers about this, and he said that out of all the subjects that we teach, because in primary school in Ireland we teach 13 different subjects,
yeah.
and he always said literacy was the most important one because, and you kind of alluded to it there, you, for the child to be able to develop, they have to have the language to express themselves. Like
Mhm.
they can say they're feeling happy and sad, yeah, but they can't say they're feeling melancholy if they don't know that word or whatever.
Right.
And like it's all about that expression and being able to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um, you touched on something there about your ancestry. I know you have Squamish ancestry. Could you tell me about like the this is going to sound stupid. Can you tell me how that influenced you growing up? Which is a really stupid question in one way, but I suppose I mean it like in what elements of your ancestry were the most important and vital to you growing up, and you think might have had a influence on you, I suppose.
Well, the interesting answer to that question is I didn't really know my ancestry growing up.
Oh,
Um, we knew a little bit about it, but because of how history worked here in British Columbia, um, the First Nations population was put into residential school and Indian day school, which was run by the church, sadly, and where their goal was to remove the Indian from
yeah,
people. So we have, I have three generations of family members who were in those schools. And so, myself, we're very separated. And what happens then is that you lose the oral tradition. And it's only just been through the last research that I've been doing over the last 5 years that I've reconnected the family, and tied all those knots, and so we're just in the process of reconciling our past with who we are now. And so I think that everything, I'm just starting to learn what has come down through our family to me, and just starting to recognize those bits and pieces. And I think one of them, like I said, was storytelling. um, And another one is, yeah, probably unschooling, which is our kind of education where we more meet the child where they are and let
Mm.
them lead us to where they want to go, and just providing enrichment, and resources for that. It's kind of the opposite of what our school system is right now, where
Yeah.
everything is government or church run and everybody has to go through um,
System.
the system and the levels. And so it's kind of the opposite of that. It's more working on the whole child as they are. And I've probably gone way off track, but those are the
It's
things that
fine.
kind of stick out for me about, now that I'm making that connection because I didn't grow up um, uh, in the culture.
Yeah. Can I ask? That must be very difficult because I can't recall if you said this while we were recording or before, but like for Squamish culture that doesn't have a written language, it must be like I can't even fathom how you can research it. Do you know what I mean? Like because
Yeah,
there's no first-hand accounts or written records. So what's
yeah.
that like to research a culture that doesn't have a written language?
Yeah, it's really difficult. For a long time, actually, up until I think just last year, the government records were closed off, so the public was not even able to access the information that they had because they did have records that were kept by Indian agents on the populations of the reservations. Um, and so, yeah, it's been really difficult. I'm so fortunate that my family, for whatever reason, and maybe it's because we're spunky and stubborn, um, ended up in the newspaper and ended up the subject of portraits, where people would go to the reservation and paint portraits of the elders.
Oh,
And so that's actually how I came across my great 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 grandmother. We never knew her name. And for years, my uncle before me and my cousin and myself have been searching and searching, because, like you said, none of this is recorded, and our history was basically cut off,
okay.
and we couldn't get past the walls. Anyway, so I opened the newspaper and I found her name, Siamalot, and uh, I was able to go back to the Squamish Nation office, to the band office, and then tell them who I was. And at that time, they were able to furnish me with pages of my ancestry because they do have the written records. Um, yeah, and so they were able to give me that, and so now we've got that super strong connection of who we are. And
Wow.
but yeah, because it's not written, it's fluke.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than that. And I'm hoping that my research has done is kind of open the door. I've actually had people contact me and say, do you know so and so? I'm this person, and I can ask them, are you related to this person? And then tell them who they are. And that's been amazing. So I'm hoping that this is really opening the doors for people, and making some inroads. I know that the government of Canada is starting to put those stats. So I think whatever the Indian agents have written down will be viewable by the public now, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they'll be able to do some family tracing themselves if they know where to start. And yeah, it's just like any other kind of research, you go along and there's little clues that get you going a little farther, or they send you back in a different way, or I just feel like it's fluke, and also hoping that the ancestors are showing me how to get there. So yeah.
It's so it's so disheartening to hear to know all that because it's just like as an Irishman, I mean,
Mm,
the English came like famously and kind of took over the country and ruled it for 800 years, but there was something called the Penal Laws
mhm.
here. I'm not going to quote the years because I'll definitely get it wrong. And I have a friend who has a master's in history, and he'll get very mad at me if I even try.
Yeah.
But like some of the laws there were like it was illegal to speak and write Irish, the
Yes.
language, which was the
Same. Yeah.
first language of the people. So it
Yeah.
just seems to be something that happens a lot in history, unfortunately, where
Yeah.
colonizers come and dictate
Yeah.
what is and isn't okay.
Yeah.
And for those listening, I did air quotes. I don't think this is okay. And it's just heartbreaking to see that. Like, I mean, I know myself with my culture, we were lucky in a sense that the Irish language was written, so it was a little bit easier to keep a kind of an unbroken line, we'd say, even if it was hidden and illegal. But for a culture that didn't have a written language, it just, it's a lot easier to break that chain if that's what your goal is, I guess. And it makes it very hard then for the current generations to repair that break.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and especially with so few elders left living. So we really treasure the people that we have here that know, and can speak to some of the um, stories from pre-colonization. And yeah, it's sad, but we will rebuild.
Yes, that's the goal. Could I ask, what? And this isn't something I sent you earlier, so sorry. We're already going
It's
off the
okay.
beaten track.
It's okay.
What constitutes who is or isn't an elder? Like, the word in my head means just someone who is older, and it's kind of an older person. But are you granted the title, I guess, of elder at a certain age, or do you kind of have to earn it? Like, what is an elder compared to?
I've read different things about it, and I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I've read one person who said that there is a difference between an elder and just an older person. Um, and I believe that an elder to me has a certain knowledge base that they share, um, who were maybe taught by pre-contact or have some knowledge of the family traditions that have come down the line. But I don't want to say that for certain
Yeah,
because
of
I don't
course.
know.
Yeah. Same as me not saying what the penal laws were. I don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Right. I'm learning as I go, so it's like very small baby steps.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's the way it happens. Um, so what was it that got you started on that path then? Because I suppose like the kind of the story of you learning about your ancestry is really interesting. So what was the catalyst that got you started in investigating that?
Yeah, a couple I think it was maybe decades ago now, my uncle Wayne Ashton was researching our family. And at one point, he had sent us out an 11 by 13 photocopy of a kind of a chart of our family up to that point. And at the very top of the chart, it had one name, Alexander Merrifield, and then unknown. And it was that unknown
Wow.
person that just intrigued me, and I just wanted to know more. And as we knew we had Squamish background, but we didn't know the details. And as the laws have been evolving in Canada, um, I just thought it's time we find out. And my dad really wanted to know, you know, more about his family and why his mom was the way she was, and his aunties, and we just all had this kind of spark in us that we just needed to find our connection to here, this place, because this place is Squamish Nation, where we're from. We
Mm.
live here now. And yeah, so it's just that kind of it's, I want to say yearning, but that's kind of just an old fashioned romantic word, but it's like a pull that we had to find out who we are.
Yeah. And so it wasn't so much one incident, it was just kind of a lifetime of like wondering that just brought you to that point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When I look at our family history, and we were all kind of just kind of no no solidity. Um
No clear
yeah.
cut line, I suppose, is the thing.
Yeah, there was no one thing or anything, but there was just a whole bunch of things and then once we did find out, suddenly, and then this is where I knew that, we'd done the right thing and been on the right path, was when you find out that information, suddenly you've got that connection and you're firm on the ground and you know who you are, and Yeah, it was really I guess I wonder if, people who are adopted who find their birth parents feel the
I
same thing, you know what
I
I
was
mean?
thinking the exact same thing. I was because it would be because I'm so the residential schools you mentioned them earlier. For those who don't know listening, anyone Irish listening, it's kind of would be the Canadian uh, equivalent to the mother and baby homes. Is what we call them here in Ireland. And
Yes, yeah.
so the mother and baby homes, for anyone who isn't listening, and the residential schools were basically a religious organization. And in Ireland, what they did was any unwed mothers would be sent to these homes, and usually what would end up happening is that the mother after giving birth, would be kept in the home more or less for the rest of her life, and the baby was adopted away. And it was horrific what happened, and there was a lot of controversy in the last couple of years about it here in Ireland. And that's one of the big things in the news now politically, whenever COVID isn't the first headline,
Right.
of people demanding from the government to unleash all the records of the mother and baby home
Yes.
so they can find. And
Yeah.
I thankfully don't have any connections to it personally, but I can understand. So then the residential schools, as you were saying, that was basically a religious organization, but instead of it inflicting it on their own members, it was inflicting it on the indigenous people.
Yeah.
So it's just yeah. I
It's
feel like our entire chat could be about those two institutions and how much
I know
damage they've
there's
done.
yeah, there is so much connection there between those two topics right there. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
massive. It's exactly the same thing. The children were just horribly abused, and um, my family survived it. And I guess, if you ask what it's something that connects me to them, and that's probably one thing also, is that kind of survivor mentality of just,
Mm.
stubborn, gotta go forward.
Yeah, I know. I totally understand. Um, well, this whole podcast is about the story of the storyteller,
Right.
and that's you. So I'd like to do a little bit of a turn now and talk more about your own personal kind of story.
Mm.
So what were the stories that really pulled you in as a kid and got into your head?
Well, I was really fortunate in one way that my mom worked, which is not always great. But the good thing is she was a professional figure skater, so she had to be at the rink really early in the morning. So I would get dropped off at school before it was open usually, and the
Mhm.
janitor would let me in. One of the first people to show up would be the receptionist and the librarian. And I wish I knew her name, but I don't, because I would love to send her flowers if she's still living, because I think she really pointed me in a direction, and I would go to her and say, "What should I read next?"
Mm.
And she introduced me to O. Henry and Dickens, and I'm looking at my list, and Aesop's Fables and Madeline L'Engle, A Wrinkle in Time, which I still read every year. Little Women, I think, because I love the historical nature of it. And I read, I went shelf by shelf in our school library, and I read all of the science, and I read all of the fables, and God, I read everything I could. And she was very good at guiding me, and I feel pretty good that I had that start of reading Dickens and everything. He was a big hero, and I love Great Expectations, and I just wanted to be able to write like that. So, and this was all I was really little. This was all when I was really young.
It's really reminding me of the relationship between Mrs. Phelps and Matilda in Roald Dahl's book Matilda. I don't know if you're aware of that or have read it. Have you?
You know what? I actually, that's probably one that I haven't read.
Really? Okay, because
Yeah.
that exact thing happens. So Matilda, before she goes to school at all. Like she's too young to go.
Hmm.
Her parents are ignoring her, so she wanders around, goes to the library, and the librarian does the exact same thing. And like she goes to the librarian and say, I'm finished. What do I read now? And like Matilda reads through all the children's sections. So then she starts giving her Dickens and giving her all these
Right.
kind of things. So you should definitely read it now. Even the first third of it, I think, is before she starts school, because it'll just bring back memories for you, I'd say.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I will for sure.
You should, you should. And that's I've said it in podcasts before. That's like one of my all-time life-altering, just really affected me books. It's such a magical, wonderful book. So definitely give it a go and let me know what you think.
Oh, I will for sure. That's awesome. Cool.
Um, now you said then that reading Dickens inspired you and wanted to get you into writing, and you wanted to be like him as a writer. So then you ended up being published at 14, which is mind-boggling that you got so published so young. So what were you published for, and then can you tell me how the journey to getting published at that age?
Sure. I was published. I wrote a review of a play that my uncle was in. They did a version of, I think it was Guys and Dolls. I know they did Fiddler on the Roof, but I think it was Guys and Dolls. Anyways, yeah, so I wrote a review and I think I just sent it to the paper or took it there and handed it in and yeah, they printed it. So that was it was just kind of I don't even think I felt courageous or anything. I just thought, well, I'm going to send this in and just did it. And then was probably feeling pretty smug when it came out, but I don't know. I think it just kind of it kind of solidified my existence as a writer in my own mind and
I know
just
what you mean. Yeah,
it was kind of like see, I told you I'm going to be a writer. Kind
look,
of a
proof.
yeah, exactly, that was it. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. And like, can you remember um anyone, like, I don't want to say doubting you because that's not the right word, but when there are certain career paths, and they're funnily enough they're all to do with the arts, like being a visual artist or being a sculptor or an actor or a filmmaker or a writer. These are careers that parents often hear, and no fault to people that are parents, but when they hear their kid wants to be that, there's sometimes a bit of trepidation of, oh, that's not a steady job, you have to pay the bills. So was there any of that from the older people in your life, your parents, aunts, uncles, that were like, oh no, don't be a writer, Jen?
No, I don't know if I ever said it out loud that way. But also, my parents divorced very early, and I kind of went back and forth, and they both had jobs. And so, no, I don't think anybody ever said anything to me like that. I think they were probably just worried that I was going to fall in with the wrong crowd, which I did for a time. But, I think they were just hoping I would make it out alive. So don't think my future career as anything. I had dropped out of school, and I'm pretty sure they just had other concerns
Concerns,
rather
yeah.
than what I was gonna do as a career.
You're gonna have to go down that road if we can. Like, so what happened? Like, who was the bad crowd you fell in with?
Mm, well,
Obviously, say as much as you're comfortable. It's
yeah.
no pressure.
Okay, so yeah, gosh, I haven't thought about back then, but I should say that I have kept a journal from all that time. So,
Mm.
I'm hoping it will be published one day because it's pretty interesting. Yeah, just kind of I was very far ahead in school, so I was very bored.
Mm.
And then so there was kids who were skipping out of school, and I was like, well, I've done my homework, I'll go hang out with you guys. So you know, drugs and stealing cars maybe and things like that. And you know, uh so anyways, that was kind of my early teens, I would say,
Mm.
until I had my baby at 15. And then
Okay.
my life kind of calmed down. And it was at that time I was like, okay, I'm going to be a writer. I've got to get serious. I joined a writing group. I wrote tons. I wrote in my journal every day. And from that time on, I kind of knew that that was hopefully going to, pay my way at some point. I should say it hasn't yet, but
We live in hope.
yes.
Um, wow, so 15, that's very young to become a parent. And I
Yeah.
mean, you've already kind of alluded to how that affected you. calmed down, you took things more seriously.
Mhm.
Um, how else, in what other ways did becoming a parent, when some would argue you're still a child at that age, so how did that, what other ways did parenthood affect you, especially at that age?
Right. Um, well, I think God, how did it affect me? It was probably pretty traumatic when I look back because I didn't have any life skills, obviously. And so finding a place to live or finding somebody that would give me a job, was really hard. That was back in I had her in 1979. So in the early 80s, that was, teen parents were still basically, like you said, they want to put you away somewhere
Mm,
and hide you out of sight.
yeah,
And so it was really rare to find someone who would give me a hand up rather than, kind of
rather
shunning
than look
the
down.
situation. Yeah, I looked down. Yeah. So I did a lot of jobs like house cleaning and things like that. But it really made me, I guess, my stubborn drive really went into full gear there when I knew that, I was only going to get ahead if I had an education. And by that time, I think I'd done a little bit of grade 9 and maybe a month of grade 10, but I so basically only had a grade 8, full grade 8 education.
Okay.
And so the first thing I did was I took, when my daughter was, I think, 6 or something, or 5, I think, um, signed up at a local college for an English course. And, I think a month into it, the instructor said, um, you we're going to have to kick you out because you don't know how to write a paper. You don't know anything about university writing. So we recommend that you drop this course, which was Shakespeare. I don't know what I was thinking, and take a
Lofty
and take
goals.
lofty goals. I thought, why not? And this is probably where you're supposed to start at Shakespeare. And anyway, so he said, I recommend you take a university writing course. So that's what I did. I took that course. And after I finished that course, I came in second in a writing contest. And
Oh
so I
wow.
knew, there's those little things that happen in your life and you're like, yes, I know I'm doing the right thing. That was one of them. So
Science.
yeah, I think having my daughter that young made me focus.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like, well, I suppose you had to, didn't you? Because I'm not a parent, but
Mhm.
I know from being a teacher that it's a common thing is when you have a kid, especially if you're a good parent, you stop thinking in I and you start thinking in we. And
Mhm.
it's not just you anymore, and you have to think
Yeah.
long term and all that kind of thing. And it seems like that's something that happened to you. Um, Now, you told me this in when we were emailing before, that so you're attending college, you were working, but you also were homeschooling your daughter at one point, as
Mhm.
well as everything else. So my question is, did you ever sleep?
Yeah. I'm still tired.
I can imagine.
I always do that. I'm always on the go with a million different things. So yeah, no, I didn't sleep much.
So what was your decision behind homeschooling? Like, what was it that
Mm,
at that time that you felt that was the best course of action to take?
yeah. I always had really strong feelings about education. And I thought that, I disagreed with the system so much. And I think around grade 2, when my daughter was in school and she was still bringing home coloring sheets, and I was like, this is like a child minding service. So what's going on here? And I just felt like it was wasted time, you know.
And could I just ask for context, grade 2, what age is that roughly?
That is probably 7,
Okay, so it's the third year in school, is it, or so?
second or third. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So around then, so I started keeping her home and homeschooling. And I thought that would be better because I could, she was already reading literature. She was already reading the books that I loved. She was an avid reader, like book a day already.
Okay.
And still, thank goodness. And so I started keeping her home and introducing her to science and things that they have would not be starting for years at her public school.
Mm.
And I would get a phone call every morning, "Are you sending your daughter to school?" And I would say, "I'm not," because it was illegal to keep her home. So they consider what I was doing illegal.
Oh, okay.
So
So there's
after,
no, at the time, there was no, sorry to cut across you, it's just that's interesting.
yeah,
At the time in Canada, it was illegal to homeschool, or did you have to do something specific for it to be legal?
yeah, for it to be legal, we needed to live 50 miles away from the nearest school where no school bus went.
Oh,
And we lived in the middle of the city.
okay.
So that was the only way. So anyways, I kind of broke those rules, and after months, maybe, I don't know how long it was, maybe a year, they finally stopped calling, and I just got her into the correspondence system that the country kids had,
Mm.
so she could still keep up with her level work. Um, but she would plow through that in like a day. It was just,
Wow.
she was just so into it. And yeah, she had a hugely well-rounded education of science and literature. And, she's an amazing writer now. And she did go back to school for her last 2 years so she could use the laboratory for her sciences. And she did advanced placement for university and just kind of sailed through. So, and during that time, she was able to travel. She traveled to Asia, and then she just did all kinds of things that, I feel like people need to experience, and stuff that you just don't get in school. Maybe some different schools, but back then it was just
Mm.
not okay with me that they were not developing my kid's mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. And like I'm thinking of it from both the Irish context and from the teacher's point of view. Like, so for example, in Ireland, in our constitution, it's actually written that the parent is the primary educator and the teacher comes after the
Ah,
parent. So as a result, like homeschooling is 100% legal, and like now you do have to register that you are homeschooling, as far as I'm aware. Um, and then from the other side of things, that's one of the most frustrating things as a teacher. Because like in Ireland at the minute, as of recording this, we have the highest class sizes in the European Union. Um, not in Europe, the continent, that goes to the UK, and we're happy they're beating us for that.
yeah.
But in the EU, we're the highest, and that's the thing that's really frustrating when I see a kid that like we can have classes of 32 and there's just one teacher, and that's for the whole day, and that's for every subject. So I
Yeah.
could be teaching a kid in the same classroom. There might be one who doesn't know even how to add, and there's another who's able to do long division, long multiplication, really, really advanced stuff. But I have to teach the middle to try and get everyone up a bit, and that's really
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So I can see it's just it's something that really bugs me about education systems, is that, like you were saying earlier, you can't always meet the child where they are, because
Yeah.
if they're behind the system, you have to push them on rather than give them time. And if they're ahead of the system, it can be basically your time is taken up by trying to catch up the kids that are a bit more behind. So it's a real,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think I felt like she was starting to fall through the cracks, and having been there myself, I didn't want her to go down my path because that
yeah.
was a hard road. So yeah, so I thought I would just nip that in the bud and try and make it better for her.
Well, it seems like you made the right decision.
I hope so. It's funny now because of COVID, she's homeschooling her kids, so
Oh, well,
it's
there you go.
full circle.
Full circle is right. So I'd like to start talking maybe about your writing now and today, and then we'll talk about your visual art as well. So, what kind of things are you writing at the minute, and what is it that really grabs you when what do you decide to write? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it a bit of both?
I'm writing everything right now. I always write in all genres. I'm the writer in residence at the British Columbia History magazine. So right now I'm writing articles for them. They do 4 issues in a year, so I've got 2 left. And I'm just kind of opening the door to Indigenous history of British Columbia because, we hear a lot about the settlers and the immigration, but there has been nothing kind of in a magazine about the First Nations population, the First Peoples who were here first and
Yeah.
their history. So I'm writing about my family and things that I found and connections to the past, and just kind of opening up more general knowledge to the readers. So I love writing nonfiction, and I'm working on a nonfiction book about my family. I tasked myself with writing a poem every month. Um,
Wow.
so I've, I'm doing probably quite a bit more than one a month because I love writing poetry.
But it's
I'm
good to have a minimum, because then, you know,
Yes,
at least you know you're working on a certain amount, you know.
yeah. Anything else is gravy.
Yeah.
And what else am I doing? I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm working on. I've got 2 things sitting with the publisher right now. They're making some decisions. And this morning I just got up and started writing. I had an idea in my head at 6:15, and then I lay in bed and I kept repeating it to myself. And I should have just got up. So I just got up and wrote it down and wrote 1,000 words. I don't know what it will be. Maybe another short story. I don't know, or beginning of something longer. So I've got, yeah, lots of things I'm always working on. I'm working on a writing course for beginners for one of our local libraries, and lots of bits and pieces.
So when I ask what are you writing, you could have just said everything and just left
Yeah,
it there.
pretty much.
When you're like, I always find it really interesting when people are writing nonfiction, because I don't want to say I can't, but it's just not something that pulls me in, I guess. So do you see much of a difference in I'll start that question again. The parts of your brain that you use to write fiction and the parts of your brain you use when you're writing nonfiction, do you think they're the same, or do you think there's overlap, or do you think they're completely different for you
Mm,
personally?
yeah, I think the sameness comes in my voice. I always have my voice, and I can see it very clearly in each genre. But definitely when I'm needing to be analytical and, writing something based on research, I'm thinking about it. And I always say that I'm doing thinking writing because when I'm writing fiction, it's more just flowing. It's just, I'm not thinking about it. I'm just writing, like it's like sprinting or free writing or stream of consciousness writing
Mm.
almost. There's no thought involved. In fact, I will um, make my font really small, or I will dim my screen so I can't see what I'm writing, so I don't go back and edit it. So I don't
Oh,
allow that thinking process to even come in to it. Like
okay,
I
that's
don't
good.
want the interruption. So yeah, when I'm writing nonfiction, I'm very particular and very careful with my wording and everything. And but poetry, fiction, whatever, I'm just like it's just kind of a
So
flow.
it seems to be the same rules, not the same rules. You seem to have the same source in your head of what you're writing, but the rules outside of your head seem to be different. Like nonfiction, you have to be really particular, but fiction, you kind of let it flow, and then I don't want to say fix it, but you do the other stuff after. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's probably more accurate because I think when I'm writing nonfiction, it flows quite fast. Also, I'm a very fast writer, um, and yeah, and the editing, of course, comes back into it after.
Hmm.
But with nonfiction, my piece is usually pretty tightly done in my first draft. With fiction, I'm when I go back and edit, I'm actually could very well carve out something brand new out of what I've written. Does that make sense? It makes sense in my head.
I love how confused you are by your own writing process, but I love it. It's brilliant. But I know what you mean, like, because the only non-fiction writing I would do, and it's not even writing, well, it kind of is, would be anything for work that I would have to do, like
Right.
plans, but it's not always plans. Sometimes I might have to write something for the kids to work on or whatever. And I know what you mean, like it's in boxes and it's structured, and there's an A, B, C, and that
Yes.
kind of thing. Whereas same as yourself, when I write fiction, I'll flow and I'll get it out. If it's something small. If it's something big like a novel, then you can see the wall behind me. That's what ends up happening. It's really structured. It's like, and then this, and then this, and then this.
Right, right, right. It's funny. I tried to do that. I tried to be more structured with my writing, and I couldn't. I made myself a little box, and I got all the cards and the fancy pen, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna write, and it's gonna be perfect, and I'm gonna line everything up, and it will be so easy. That lasted about 5 seconds. Sometimes I come across a card and it's got a scribble on it and whatever. I can't do it that way. It's still good for you.
I you see, the thing is, I tried. So like my first book, which is there behind me, The Longest Night, like I wrote that and I really planned it pretty meticulously, and then I decided, oh, do you know what I'll do? I'll when I write the sequel, I'll I'll the whole, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Like I said, all right, what I'll do is I'll make this up,
Right.
I'll write it as I go instead of planning it. And I got like 30, 35 to 40,000 words written, but then I just came to a brick wall and I just like right up against it, and I froze and I didn't know what to do. And I haven't deleted it, but I've essentially I've just like, oh, I'll email it to myself, and then I deleted it from my computer because I was just like, oh no, it's rubbish and I hated it. So this is me trying again, this like big, really structured plan. I think it's just, I think, as I said, like I have to, when I'm doing stuff for work, it's very structured and it's very so I just think my brain works in that way.
Mm.
But hopefully it'll still produce something worth reading at the end.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Good for you.
And so you're also a visual artist, and I would love to talk about that. So first, what kind of art do you make? Is it paint? Is it sculpture? Is it like, what type of art do you make first? Out of curiosity.
I make all art, any art. I don't paint in oils because I haven't quite got the knack of that, and I don't fancy the smell of them. So I do, what do I do? I paint, I sketch, I sculpt, I spin my own wool. So I also do a Squamish form of weaving.
Wow.
I will try anything. I love being creative, and I just love, I'm so interested in all of it. I want to do it all. But mostly, my main source of income is my painting. Although I did just have one sculpture in a show that was just over. So that was my first sculpture. Um, yeah, but it's mostly painting. It's my big source of income, and the sketches and stuff. And that they've had, that's where I've had my most exhibitions with my work and everything.
Wow. Okay. And when you're like, what usually, I suppose the medium kind of dictates it, right? But what is the subject of your art usually? I know you said you do the Squamish weaving, so that'd be fairly obvious. But with the sculpture and the painting, what usually is your theme or your topic? Like, what are you painting? What are you sculpting? Or is it kind of, again, a bit of anything?
It's a bit of everything. Yeah, do do I do find some themes in my work. I love to paint and draw dogs, um, nature, birds. Um, but then again, it's kind of the same way that I write fiction. I just kind of do it very intuitively, and I often don't even see what it's going to be until near the end.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of chuck paint on the canvas and wait and see what it's going to be. Um, but yeah, a lot of dogs. I've just taken a sketching class because I didn't really know how to draw. So I now I'm filling up sketchbooks every night, and but it still seems to be a lot of dogs.
Yeah, look, they say write what you know, draw what you know.
Yeah,
Like it's the same thing.
yeah. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I know. I spotted the dog. For those listening, there's a gorgeous looking dog sitting on the couch behind Jen. Who's that behind you? Out of
That's
curiosity.
that's Obi.
Obi. Oh, he's
Yeah.
lovely. I have a dog as well, and I always feel bad because whenever I record a podcast, my poor other half has to keep her really quiet in the other room because we live in
Yeah.
like a two-room flat, so it's very like, shh, keep quiet, he's recording. Um,
Uh,
but,
well, I've had to close all my windows and blinds so the dogs won't bark at a squirrel because we have tons of squirrels outside, and that's to save your ears.
thank you for thinking of my ears. Um, so you told me as well that and this is something I'm very interested in, that you're an award-winning visual artist. So what how did that come about? Like is to become an award-winning artist, and I'm sure like there's lots of ways to do it. Like is it you see an award and you put yourself forward, or is it more you have to get found or get noticed? How does that work?
Yeah, when I started, I just started painting in 2015. So at that time, it was all kind of very fluky again. I just took this course and I started painting and posting my pictures on social media, and people were just like rushing to buy them.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, well, this is something that I love because I just couldn't wait to get up in the morning and paint. I just love it. And so I was trying to figure out ways to structure the business side of things. So I
Mm.
started joining the art associations and federations and things like that. And the federation here has, annual contests or whatever. And so once in a while, I would submit something. And the first time, yeah, I got a phone call, and they were like, "Hey, you've won." I think it was second or third place in something, and I was like, "Holy cow!" I couldn't believe it because this is like our big art federation. So it was kind of like, okay, well, that felt pretty good, and so I did that a few more times, and same result. So yeah, I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm an artist. I can like call myself an artist now. So that
That
was
must have
pretty
felt
great.
really validating, did it?
Yes, validating. That's right. Yeah. See, it's early here and I'm not
I,
awake with the big words yet. But yeah, that's exactly it.
yeah,
Validating.
that's no, I know what you mean. Don't worry. I've had to do podcasts the other way around, where it's late for the other person, and I'm getting up early, going, "Oh, good morning." Yeah. um, that's really interesting. So you said a second ago, well, a few minutes ago, that painting is now your main source of income, but you only
Mm.
started it in 2015. So
Yeah.
that's it. That's like a skyrocket in terms of capability or talent. So like, at what point did painting become like, was that something you were working towards, or was it just that, you know what, people really like this, I should start selling, and then all of a sudden you realized it was your main source of income?
Yeah, I was so busy with it. I was actually in Harvard at the time studying computer science, and I got so busy with painting and people wanting to buy my work, and I was so caught up in it. I quit school at that time and just started painting full time because I loved it and I felt that I was pretty good at it. And also people were saying that, and I think that if you look at my number of shows and exhibitions and things that I've had, yeah, my work, people really seem to like it. So yeah, so I just devoted myself to that, and
And look at you now.
look at me now. No, but it was really hard to learn the business aspect of it,
Yeah,
how how to sell, and I'm not a very good marketer. Like I don't market myself. I don't feel very well, and that's why I'm trying to do this podcast tour for my book, just to, you know what I mean, just to get myself out there and try harder.
I know. Yeah, it is one of the harder parts of being an independent creative. Like
Yeah,
write. I can only speak to writing, obviously, but with writing, if you're traditionally published, it doesn't mean it's easier, but there is a team behind the book. It's not just yourself, and you still have to do a lot of the marketing yourself, but at least there's somebody to put you in contact with the right people. Whereas
yeah,
ourselves, our independent creators, we have to forge those connections ourselves, and it's a whole different ball game, isn't it? And it's a whole different skill set.
It really is, yeah, and I didn't think I was very good at it at the beginning, but so I just did everything I could. I just, a little bit of everything, selling online and selling at exhibitions and building my own websites and
It's
taking
all,
lots of
yeah.
classes. Yeah, just and spreading the net wide, I think is what you would say is, and now I've got people who collect my work all around the world actually. So
Wow.
it's worked.
Well, you're doing something right.
Yeah, I think so.
And this is something I think is, again, I said earlier, we hit on a topic that we could probably fill the whole hour of a podcast with, and I feel like this is one we could as well. Um, do you think visual art is a form of storytelling?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I know that I feel that actually not just visual art, but any kind of creative thing that we can do as people is just another voice that we have.
Hmm.
And so I think everybody can paint and I think everybody can write and I think that everybody can do the arts, because it is just another voice, whether it's developed or not. I think we all have it. So, and I think it is just another form of storytelling because it's another way to connect that place in us can connect with that place in somebody else.
Oh, I love that. I
Mhm.
love that. That's great.
Oh, good. Okay.
That's such a, sorry, I just, that's like something you should put on your website, like a little
Okay.
tagline. And seeing as you're so good at marketing and stuff, there's your tagline.
Yeah, right.
But I know what you, no, I know what you mean. It's um I I was a guest on a podcast, which is very rare for me. Only yesterday, and that was one of the questions was, what is what's the most satisfying part of being a writer in terms of people commenting on my work or something. And I was quite honest and said, just when someone says they like it, because it's great to
Yeah.
see something that I mean, yourself, you've written books, and even with painting, like, there's hours and hours, and sometimes with novels there can be literally, there's months, maybe years,
Mhm.
of you in that, and for someone to take that independently and say, I enjoyed this, it's like, oh, you like me. And
Yeah.
it's like the validation we were talking about earlier when you won those awards. It's just, it kind of, it makes you feel real, I suppose.
Yeah, and not so, yeah, exactly, not like a fake. Like I
It's not a
just,
hobby
but
anymore.
yeah, exactly. Or yeah, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to think of. But anyways, yeah, exactly. I just yeah, it is all my words are gone now. But yeah,
It's
exactly.
morning, it's fine.
Yeah, it's yeah, definitely. Sorry. I
Yeah.
can't think at all.
No,
Uh
no.
but yeah, it's also satisfying to know that you can reach another person that way because the more we find out about people and all the different ways people learn and all of the spectrum and everybody is so different, being able to reach somebody on a level like that, yeah, exactly, where they can write to you and say, I really enjoyed this story, or that made me cry, or I laughed at your painting this morning, yeah, that's like,
Yeah.
yay.
And that's one thing I always try to push out there. I think since becoming a writer, I now make such an effort that when I read something, particularly with reading, I suppose it didn't cross my mind with art, but I do it a bit with art. That when I see something, I will try to find the creator and I'll say, I saw this and I enjoyed it, or I read it and
Yeah.
it made me laugh, because I know what it's like on the other side, because you don't get those comments that much, and it really motivates you and inspires you, and just, you have a bit of a pep in your step. you know
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I always do that too.
Mm.
And actually, when my daughter was small, she would write to authors of books that she liked, and they would
Ah,
write back. And um, yeah, being part of that whole, back and forth and just that flow of gratitude is so, I think it's so important to tell people that we appreciate them and what they do. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly. It's about appreciation and gratitude.
Yeah.
Um, so now to kind of we started talking about your excuse me about your Squamish ancestry, and now we're talking about your art. And you
Mm,
mentioned, and I'll read the question as it was written, and then I'm going to rephrase it because I think I have a better way to say it now.
okay.
Um, I had originally asked, how much does your Squamish ancestry influence your writing and your art? But you've kind of already answered it in that you do the Squamish style of weaving. So could you maybe can you tell me a bit about that? Like, obviously someone had to teach you if there's a particular way to do it. So how did you find someone that was able to teach you?
Yeah, this was all part of the journey, this this was something that I discovered when I was researching my family, that my great 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 auntie was a weaver.
Hmm.
And I came across a piece of film in the Canadian Archive in Ottawa, which is at the other side of the country, of by somebody named Harlan Smith, who had come here to BC and was filming different Indigenous dance and things like that. And this was in 1926, I believe.
Wow.
So I found that and I was like, wow, that's maybe where I got my love of wool, because I love spinning and preparing wool, and so I found, and I'm not exactly sure if my timeline of saying this is all correct, because I'm not sure which piece came first, but then I found um, my great 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 auntie's grandson, who actually teaches Squamish weaving.
Oh, right. So he'd be your like second or third, fourth cousin or something like
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, second cousin once removed or something like that. And so him and his wife, the Chief Janice George, and his name is Buddy Joseph, they teach Squamish weaving in the traditional style. And COVID happened. I was going to take their course. So they actually moved it online. So I was still
that. Oh,
able to learn and take the class. So yeah, that was really amazing. And if you kind of look around, there are a few websites and you can see people doing some traditional weaving, so that you can pick up a few things there. But to actually be taught by somebody who who knows and does that, and who had come down the family, and to be part of my family,
yeah.
to be taught by them was, yeah, was amazing. So yeah, really, I love to do that. I love wool and everything to do with wool and sheep.
So it's in a way we kind of mentioned about how COVID. Again, I'm not sure if this is before you're recording or not, but we mentioned how podcasting and things like this has become so international, and so it's made the world smaller. And I suppose that's one great thing about the I know it's very difficult to research Squamish, your Squamish heritage, due to the lack of the written language. But in a way, the internet has made it easier almost, because you wouldn't have been able to take that class
Yeah,
without the internet. And there's so many things that wouldn't make it
yeah,
possible. So it's great in the sense that there's a pro and a con, I suppose, to researching it
yeah.
in today's
And
climate.
I think, but during COVID and stuff, yeah, it's such a terrible time. But all of this stuff, if you just look for the good, and I think, be
Oh, you
grateful
have
for
to.
the things like this, because I am so grateful for everything that's happened to me personally during COVID. Yeah, it's opened my eyes and opened my world. And yeah, it's been, along with the sad, there's been a lot of really great stuff.
Brilliant. Um, we're coming up on time, so I'm gonna go to I always ask the last the same few questions at the end, because it's always very different answers. So when we're done our interview and we've stopped recording and we've done our chats and goodbyes, what's the first thing you're gonna do?
Probably take the dogs outside,
Fair.
and probably make a cup of tea and have some lunch.
Sounds
And
doable.
answer my emails, because I have so many emails every day that I have to do.
Admin is so much fun.
Takes hours,
I
God.
know, I know.
It's so hard.
What then, for my next question, what are your general kind of big goals as a creator? Usually I ask as a writer, but you're a visual artist as well. So what's kind of like your next big thing that you really want to achieve?
You know what? I only have one goal this year. Well, I kind of would love to uh, get another publishing deal. I was really wanted to do one a year, but we'll see. That it feels like it's getting late in the year already, even though it's only April.
I know,
Um,
yeah.
but the one task I set for myself is to knit myself a sweater.
Yay.
That's my big goal this year, is to knit a sweater. I studied really hard and I learned Norwegian style of knitting last winter, the continental style. And so I worked really hard at that. And yeah, I found that I can't really follow a pattern. Isn't that funny? Because I'm so organized, but I can't follow a pattern if my life depended on it. So I'm having to make it up myself. So anyway, that's my big goal this year, is to knit a sweater, and I'll email you and show you a picture in December
Oh,
because I
dude,
am going to do it.
I'm gonna get an email like 11:59 on December
Yeah,
31st. I did it. I did
that's right. You're gonna.
it. Good. I can't wait to see it. Um, have you any goals in general that have nothing to do with creating? Well, you see, that's a question I normally ask because I usually have writers, and I'm like anything to not to do with writing. But we've talked about all those kind of things. But is there any other goals then that are kind of more to do with academic stuff, or as opposed to creative?
Right. Well, I'm hoping to raise enough money to, or I should say that people are not buying very many paintings due to COVID, so that is kind of a drag. But I really want to continue my courses at Harvard, where I'm in the Graduate School of Education. So I hope to go back this fall. And I guess aside from that, really my main goal that is not super creative is I just really would like to try and avoid getting COVID.
Okay, I agree.
I'm due
Not
for
what I
my
expected.
shot. I'm due for my shot soon, but I'm really getting scared because we're in our third wave right now, and there's all of the Brazilian stuff coming up here. So I'm really getting nervous again because we've never been so bad. Even last year, like we're off the charts right now. So yeah, that would be my big goal. I really try just to stay well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think in pandemic times that is a very relatable goal, and I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of people listening to that'll be listening and watching this going, "Oh, me too."
yeah. Stay alive.
Yeah, goal
2021.
number one.
Yeah.
So just the last two questions, then we'll wrap up. First is where can people, and there will be links and stuff like that, but where is the kind of best place for people to find you and your art and your writing online?
Yeah, so for my writing, jenniferashton.ca, um, just how it sounds, two N's in Jennifer, and jennashtonart.com. I'm on all the social media at Ravon Studio, Raveon Studio, Ravon Studio, and a couple other ones that you'll be posting up there. But those ones, and you can Google me and I pretty much come up, I think.
Good.
Well, I come up
You're
everywhere.
lucky because most people like Google me and then like seven people with the same name show up. Um, and then my final question, what was the last book you read?
Okay. The last book was, I think, The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. Or, you know what? I'm lying. That was an audiobook and I listened to Tom Hanks read it.
That's reading. I consider
Oh,
that
it's
reading. Yeah.
okay. Because it was just so delightful. That was just, yeah, it was so good.
I
She's
didn't
my
realize
hero.
Tom Hanks was doing audiobooks. I must check that out
Oh
because
my God, you
he just
have to
has one of
listen
those
to that.
voices he could read a cookbook or an instruction manual
Yeah,
and you'd be
he
like,
makes
oh,
that story come alive. It's so amazing. And then also Moon of the Crusted Snow by my friend Wab Rice. I say friend, but he was a guest on my book launch.
oh,
I'm going to call him a friend now.
you
Sorry,
can.
Wab. I hope that's okay. Anyways, which is amazing, and I highly recommend it. That was the last book I held in my hand and finished. And I've always got tons of books on the go, but those are two that I've finished. Yeah,
Brilliant.
highly
Um,
recommended.
Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show and for being such a delightful guest and for educating me and just inspiring me and the listeners and everybody like that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thank you.